Thank you all for joining us today for our Tlingit Haida lunchtime chat. Today we're really excited as we launch a series of Native Vote. You may have visited our last lunchtime chat when we talked about Native Vote and census and how important it is. And this will be the first of a series of lunchtime chats that we'll have, getting to know the candidates, because nothing is better than an informed voter. So we're excited today to be able to have with us representatives of the Juneau School Board and the City and Borough of Juneau District Assembly. So today we have with us from the Juneau School Board candidates, Martin Steppeton Sr. and Brian Holst. And then we have with the CBJ District 1 Assembly candidates, Kennedy Solomon Gross and Alicia Hughes Scandis. And I would like to invite each one of you in the order that I read for you to introduce yourself and just give us a little brief intro.
Well, thank you very much, Tlingit Haida, for this invite today. I just want to say that I'm speaking today from distance from Tlingit land. Thank you for letting us work on your land today. My name is Martin Stepton. I'm originally from St. Paul Island, Alaska. I am Unangan Aleut. I have 4 kids with my wife, Ann Stepton, who's from Angoon. And I moved here in 2011. I have mostly done construction. I've worked in the mines here in Juneau. I've done a lot of work starting in 2014, really starting to get behind education at the state level and advocating for funding to raise the BSA specifically, and that led me to learn a lot about the funding formula for the state of Alaska. And later on, I got involved in advocating for funding from the municipality level to fund to the cap. The city assembly is always so gracious with us, and they have, as long as I've been here, they've always funded to the cap, and I really support that. And so I learned about that. I learned about the funding, what makes our education system click. And so from there, it was kind of naturally for me wanting to get on the school board. And I tried last year and came up short. And so I'm trying again this year, and I'd be happy to have your vote. Let's all make sure we get out the vote this year and get your votes in, get your voice heard. Thank you.
Next, Brian.
Good afternoon. Good noches to Tlingit Haida Central Council for organizing today's forum. Yes, I'm Brian Holst, and I'm running for re-election to the Juneau board. We moved as a family to this place we all now call Juneau in 1978 of the Coast Guard family, and my mother, a dance teacher. I graduated from JDHS in 1984. Then I went off and studied politics, philosophy, and economics, joined the Peace Corps, married my lovely wife, Estella. I've had 4 children along the way. I worked abroad for 20 years. I served as the chair of the Board of Education in International School of Belgrade. And I returned in 2008 to work as the executive director of the Juneau Economic Development Council. I was elected 6 years ago. This is will be my 3rd term and probably my last. If I get elected. I've been enjoying it. I have 4 children, 3 are still in the system. And just a couple of things I want to say about what I feel the situation is. High quality education is really a foundation for our future, for individuals and society. Education needs to be a great equalizer. Our schools are good. They can and should be better. They're improving for everyone, but too many kids and too many minorities and low-income kids don't do as well as they should. We need a more comprehensive approach to early education. We need our students, all of our students, to see themselves, our rich community, in our schools more so. We need more project-based, hands-on learning. And our students need to graduate with some direction. It's not enough just to get them to the goal line, but there has to be a a plan and a path to get them into a jobs or a career. We recently adopted a strategic plan. It's important that we implement that. And my final comment is if it doesn't come up, we need something. We have a strategic plan for K-12, but we need as a community to create an education compact for Juneau that can really bring us all together, that will target investments to build stronger families, more vibrant culture, and a more vibrant economy. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And now we're moving on to you, Kenny. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, that would help. Jackie, thank you. Ashish, thank you to Tlingit Haida for hosting today's lunchtime chat. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Kenny Solomon Gross, and I'm a longtime Juneau resident whose family owns and operates a multi-generation business. I'm the fourth generation, my sister and I, who run our company, Gross Alaska Theaters. I am a husband and a father, and I raised 2 children by myself before I met my wife, Raquel, and her son a little over 5 years ago. Presently, I serve as Vice President and General Manager of Gross Alaska Theaters, Inc. And I started my career in the theaters in 1981 and then expanded my horizons. So when I say that, basically what I'm saying is I no longer want to work for my father anymore. So I moved out of Juneau and I moved to Las Vegas, where I worked my way through the casino gaming industry. I started as a casino dealer and I worked my way to being one of the casino managers at Caesar's Palace. I was there during 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina. I was one of the crisis managers who helped the guests and employees navigate through those very, very terrible times. I plan on using these same skills with the crisis management on the assembly as we work towards recovering from the pandemic that resulted from the impact that destroyed our economy, basically, at nobody's fault. You know, this was nobody's fault at all. I returned to Juneau in 2007 to join my sister to run my family business. My father got sick and I came back. So I wanted to jump into this community, back into the community that I love as a volunteer. And I got involved with the DZ and was in the Ropes Project and coached a little bit of basketball and baseball and stuff. And currently I serve the community as I'm on the CBJ Bartlett Hospital Board. I'm also on the Board of Equalization. I'm on the Bartlett Foundation Board, which is just a lovely board that able to give out a lot of scholarships. It's just great. Also, I was one of the people that were in charge of moving the gift shop over when we put chemo over there, and we actually put Sacred Grounds as in our gift shop there at the hospital. Hopefully we're going to get that open. Well, it is open, but hopefully visitors will come back and they'll be able to enjoy it. But our employees are enjoying it at the hospital. I'm currently the vice president of the Downtown Business Association, so I know how economic sovereignty to the tribes is so important, and we want to make sure that we keep that going. And I currently am the president of Glacier Valley Rotary. And I got a lot of energy because I can keep going. As a community, we have difficult choices ahead of us, and my many years of experience in management, schools, Brian, that's for you. We're going to fund them all the way to the cap. Community and government boards gives me a unique perspective that will allow me to bring a proactive approach to finding solutions. And as we all know, Juneau is an amazing community which to live and to raise a family. And this is what drives me to serve on the community, on the assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and Alicia.
There's my unmute button. I found it. Thank you, Ganoshish, to Tlingit Haida for the invitation and for having us here today to come speak with you. So I moved here 16 years ago to attend the University of Alaska Southeast, and I just fell in love with the community. And I've been really grateful to live on the lands of the Akwán and Takuquan ever since, and just grateful to be here. I work as a grants administrator during the day for the state of Alaska. And for the past 2 years, I have been your current District 1 Assembly member. So I'm running for re-election because as somebody who was part of the initial response to this pandemic and was there at the time, I just really feel a sense of responsibility to keep doing this and to see this thing through. It feels like my duty to make sure that Juneau comes through this and we're in really good shape on the other side. There's still key decisions to be made. We know it's going to be a hard year to balance the budget. And I just feel like my experience on the assembly, having already worked with these people on these issues, makes me beneficial to the community to continue serving and to continue working for Juneau. I think we were making good progress on our goals prior to this happening. And I would like to continue working on some of the things we were. I'd like to continue working on childcare, affordable housing, homelessness. To our school board candidates, I will say funding our schools to the cap, since I know that's what you want to hear. But these are all things I really would like to see us continue working on and continue thinking long-term about Juneau's future, and in the short term about keeping Juneau safe and using my experience to do that. So thank you again for having me here today.
Thank you. Well, as you can see, we have a great panel today. And at the very beginning, I was so excited about introducing them, I didn't introduce myself. So, kusin yuhatu asak luka adi hayahat kagwantan yari yeshetach. My name's Jackie Haida, and I am the second vice president for Tlingit Haida. And I'm here in place of President Peterson, who wasn't able to, his voice is a little weak today. And so he asked me to assist him, and I always want to help him out. I'm so proud of the things that he and the tribe are accomplishing. So let's get on to the questions, because that's what we really want to be here for, and to hear what they are. So I'd like to start with our school board candidates. And my first question is, reading at a grade level by the third grade is a key indicator of the future success in school. Too many of our Juneau students are not proficient. What do you think the school district should do to support early literacy?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry.
All right.
Go ahead, Martin, you first, and then Brian.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this is a well-known issue that has been long-standing. One of the long-standing issues I keep bringing up that I really want to tackle. I want to do something bold with reading this on my term within the next 3 years if I'm elected. I think we have tried many efforts. We're doing work in this area. We're trying to make progress, but it's not as fast as we would like. And really, we don't have all the resources that we need. Our schools have been flat funded for many years now, and it's cutting into our buying power for everything, really. So, but I think it's time for us to look outside to see what has worked for other people. We know that the state of Florida is doing really well with their students on reading, and if you look at Oklahoma, the Alaska Native population there has got a really high proficiency of reading there. And how did they become that successful? And so I think it's time for us to maybe look outside, figure out what works for other people, and try to emulate that here, because what we've been doing in the last few years hasn't worked as fast as we wanted to, and we're paying attention to this, but I think it's time to do something bold on this, and I would like to see something done within my 3-year term. Thank you.
Thank you. And Brian?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Martin, for your answer. Martin mentioned 2 states, Florida and Oklahoma. Both of them have universal pre-K programs. We don't have that in Alaska, and that really hurts us. Our kids don't arrive at school by their own state assessment. Every state is required to have an assessment, and only 30% of our kids-ish arrive ready to learn, meaning they have the skills to be able to follow directions, play productively, so that they can engage in school. We end up having to, it's not wasted time because these are our children, but we have to spend time doing things other than teaching, learning. So early literacy is key to that is an early high quality pre-K program, which our assembly has made great progress on. And I know that these 2 candidates are going to continue to support that. We did something bold last year while our budget was being cut, we actually increased parent-teacher ratio for every grade in the Juneau School District except K1, 2, and 3, where we reduced PTR. And that was because like Martin said, we are incredibly frustrated. We have identified that this is a huge goal. And what is really sad about this is that when we look at the numbers, our Native population is particularly impacted by our lack of success at third grade. We do a pretty good job of catching up, but our Native population is about 20 points lower than the rest of the population in those scores. So it's super challenging. It's a huge problem. We're committed to figuring out solutions. We're glad Martin is going to be there to help us really think through what can we do differently and better, because doing the same thing isn't working.
Thank you. And certainly when we talk about disruptions, we know that COVID-19 has caused a lot of disruptions to the school system. Anchorage announced that they were going to restart reopening their schools. Under what circumstances do you think the district should allow in-class participation? And what do the schools need to do to support our teachers during this environment? And I'm going to start with you, Brian.
Great, thank you for that question. We need to follow the health guidelines, of course, and currently Juneau's numbers of cases is too high to get us all back in the classroom. On the September 28th, we're going to meet as a board to discuss where we are. Our plan was first quarter of secondary and first trimester of elementary would be distance. We're going to reevaluate that. Hopefully caseload is down. Even if caseload doesn't get to where we can bring back all the kids, we need to start bringing back some kids and for some classes, because there are students that are hurt more by the distance than others, and there are certain classes that just are impractical to deliver. So that is something we definitely are doing already and need to do more. And our teachers, they need support. They need professional development. We were in a bad place last spring because we weren't ready for this. We've now have brand new platforms that the teachers are using. It's taken some time to adjust, it's taken some parent time to adjust, but education is being delivered in a much more consistent, high quality manner. We need to do that, but we need to train our teachers, have some patience, and learn from this. We have some parent engagement that levels this year because of the pandemic that we haven't experienced in the past. It's not perfect, but we actually see increased levels of engagement. So we need to learn from this, because there is some good coming out of this bad situation.
Thank you. Martin?
Yeah, so I definitely believe in following our guidelines. We need to follow these professionals' advice on what we need to do with here as a school district, and I am all for safety first. We've seen the consequences of trying to start schools back up too soon from schools down south, trying to start up too soon, and then they got to shut down, and you got 500 students getting tested. Our school district, we're about 4,700 students. We're 300 teachers, 600 staff members altogether, and so it's way too big to try to be willy-nilly with it. We have to follow the guidelines to the T, and we do have some kids in school already, and those students distance learning doesn't work for them. And I think the biggest mistake we could make here is making distance learning hold students back. As a school district, we need to hold ourselves accountable and make sure that we're not allowing students to fall behind because of COVID-19 and because of distance learning. Those students that it absolutely doesn't work for, we need to try to get them into the school somehow, some way, because we can't just allow time to pass with these students failing. So that's going to be my number one goal this year, is to make sure we're not allowing students to fall behind due to COVID-19. And supporting teachers, I think we just need to make sure they have everything that they need. For pandemic, you want to send a teacher into a classroom with 30 other kids. I know for a fact that I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. So I think increased communications with the labor unions. We've already increased communication with the labor unions already, but maybe follow along a little bit closer. Make sure the teachers are getting the resources that they need, and that might be facilities, that might be more cleaning supplies. I don't know, but making sure we're on the same page with them. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And real quickly, I know that you guys all want to talk about what you think is the school district's greatest need is. So if you could just tell me what you think that top recommendation that you would have for the school district.
Who first?
Go ahead. Sorry. I wanted to reverse the order. So we're going to start with Martin.
What do you see are the greatest worst? Well, I definitely think that I'll go right into my top priorities. My top priorities are trying to expand the TCLL program, and everybody that wants to be in TCLL, Tlingit Language Learning and Literacy, is not in TCLL. Just my kids' class, they're in second grade. There's a list of 17 students that want to get in but can't get in because we just don't have enough room. And people want to be in these classes. They want their kids to be in Tlingit Language Learning and Literacy. So I want to expand that program. That's one of my number one top priorities. The other top priority for me is really trying to tackle the reading and literacy, trying to get our students up to par by third grade. And really making sure that we do something with that, and that's an ongoing issue. We're trying to work on that as a district. Even me personally, trying to make sure my kids are up to speed with reading. They're caught up. So doing something big and bold on that within my 3-year term is a top priority. And my third one is going to be safety. School safety was a huge thing last year with national shootings, and if you walk into any school right now, you could walk right into any schools. They might try to stop you to say, hey, you need to sign in, but for the most part, you could walk into any school right now except for Thunder Mountain, the brand new schools. They have to let you in. And I think we need to do that to all the schools. School safety is huge. Our kids need to be safe in school. So entry into schools whenever a school session's on needs to be fixed. And of course, we're in a pandemic now. How are we safely going to get our kids back to school? I think one of the smartest things we could do is making all of our bathrooms touchless. If you go into any of the brand new airports around the nation right now, you see that the sinks are touchless, the toilets are touchless, the paper towel dispensers are touchless. So technology like that can really come into play to keeping our schools safe. So that's my top priorities. Thank you.
Thanks. And Brian?
Yeah, so is it top priorities or because there are?
Well, no, the list would be too long.
So it's hard to sum it up, but I would say our biggest need, because our schools are good, and to really make them great, we need the community, the entire community, to really embrace our schools. And I think that happens to a bit, but we got to get ourselves out of a silo. We have to understand that this is one part of our fabric, and it links to so many things. We need the pre-K connection to work. We need to be able to have supports to allow for the mental health support of our students. The culture of this community needs to be felt in our schools. It is wonderful that on my time on the board, we have received gifts of names, Tlingit names of our buildings, which makes our kids more engaged. We have to remember, our kids that are doing less well in our school are low-income students and predominantly Native students, and that shouldn't be the case. And so there are some things about the way we are operating that needs to be strengthened as part of the collective. So I'm advocating for a Juneau Education Compact that brings groups like Central Council even more directly tied to the success of our schools, because we got a little role, but it's really a bigger role of supporting young people to launch their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. So, right now while we're dealing with school and school issues, it's on everybody's mind because we have a lot of parents who are dealing with in-home learning. And so I want to turn now to our CBJ Assembly members with this next question that kind of transitions education into the Assembly's responsibility. So our parents are finding difficulty juggling their lives, their work life, and homeschool challenging. And some parents and students are dealing with some of the other challenges of lack of internet access for remote learning. What's your plan to address the schooling issues stemming from COVID-19 pandemic? And let's go ahead and start with you, Kenny. And you got to turn off, we got to hear you.
That works better. So thank you very much. And I just want to stop for a second and say how much I appreciate listening to Martin and Brian talk about their passion for the schools and stuff. And, you know, everybody out here is struggling, especially with, you know, people not being able to take care of their kids and not being able to go to work because the schools aren't in session and stuff. And you know, I being a single parent, I know how difficult it is for parents to not being able to go to work because they don't have nowhere to take their kids. You know, this isn't a problem that's just started because of the pandemic. We've had childcare issues for a long time. Although here we're kind of dealing with the segment of kids that were always in school. So I know that there's some rally programs that we're talking about funding with some of the CARES Act funds and stuff like that. And I really want to hear from the professionals. And I'm going to say, Brian, you and your board, you know, what we can do as assembly members to help help the schools, you know, be better off, and to help the parents of the schools and the kids do well. You know, I think Dr. Weiss is just an amazing hire for us. And you know, also looking at Tlingit Haida, what you guys do to support, you know, early child development is excellent, and what you guys are doing to support families during the pandemic is great. And we need to take up, you know, maybe a little page out of your playbook. So I really think that this community has some great resources, and we need to really rely and look at them and what the private sector can do and what our NPOs can do, and you know, what our tribal community can do to help everybody deal with this solution. You know, unfortunately, there's not a playbook for a pandemic, and we're all in it. So we're all kind of trying to do the best. And I know that right now with Brian and Martin being new, that our school district is really going to be in good hands with Dr. Weiss. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks. Alicia?
Thanks. So this is an interesting one because it takes something like a pandemic to bring sometimes the assembly and the school board together when a problem is so great that it needs everybody's minds to solve. Because really, I don't think not everybody I've talked to in the community realizes that, you know, with the assembly and the school board both being their own separate elected bodies, that, you know, we decide how much support financially to give to the schools, and then that's normally where it's good to have a great working relationship with them, and we really appreciate our school board, but we don't tell them what to do. We sometimes make suggestions, and then this has really brought us together in a way where we are trying to solve the problem together. So I think it's really important that the city makes resources, financial and otherwise, available to the schools, because it is absolutely our responsibility to ensure that people have an equal access to quality education. And the virtual education is not work for some families. And so when there's issues like a lack of internet or a lack of a computer or something like that, that is on us to get that equipment to those families. Because this is another example of where inequities can get worse in our community. You know, I'm a state worker, and I have an office job, and I've been able to work from home this entire pandemic. And while it might not be ideal if I have a toddler tugging on my leg while I'm trying to do my work, that's very different than somebody who has to leave the house and is trying to figure out who's going to stay with their child, and one, get the access and the computer, and then two, who's going to help them complete assignments. So we don't want that disparity to get greater for those who have resources and those who don't. So I think really for the assembly's role, it is on listening to the needs of the school board, and then and then coming through on that to solve those problems.
Great, thank you. And I was going to move on to the rest of the assembly classes, but I really do think this question needs to be responded to by our school board candidates. So I'm going to turn to you, Brian, first, particularly focusing in on this access to the internet issue, because I think the school has done a great job at trying to set up the new systems and stuff. But how big is this issue, and what do you propose about it?
Well, thank you. First, I want to thank Central Council because you have been very generous in providing Chromebooks to many, many, many students. And that is just so wonderful that we can collaborate that way, because we had some money from CARES. We were trying to get a one-to-one program. We learned that you had some resources, and then you were able to distribute to your members equipment, and we were able to complement that. So the money went further. More kids were able to participate. Internet, we are trying to get internet to every student, and it's not working. I learned yesterday that there's a family that hasn't been able to connect. We issue devices, little hotspots, but it turns out that, you know, if you've got more than 2 kids and they're on the internet at the same time, they're not able to do classes. So our system, well-intentioned, isn't working really well. So we have more work to do on that. And I know that I know that the assembly is going to get an additional request. We've spent all of our CARES money at the school district, and we need more resources. We have been allowing some kids students to come to buildings just for that purpose. And so there are some students, because they don't have internet at home, they're able to come into a classroom as a family unit and spend some time there so that they can access that. We've turned on internet in the parking lots. So every school building, you can drive up to the building and sit in your car with internet pointing out. It's not perfect, but it's a way to let kids participate. So no perfect solutions, but a huge emphasis. And if somebody knows a family that doesn't have internet, let us know, because the district is committed to getting each kid access.
Thank you. And Martin, anything you would like to add?
Well, I just want to, I don't know the numbers, you know, off the top of my head, but I want to make sure that this problem here is elevated to our assembly, because the assembly is working frantically right now to try to spend $58 million before December 1st, you know, so this would be a really good area to make sure that from now until at least a year from now, that our school district, all of our students have enough funding in place to take care of internet costs, and I would advocate to our current assembly members that that's a really good area to spend funding. As Brian said, we spent our COVID money already, so I think the important part here is to make sure that just everybody has it. If we need to do more community outreach to make sure that nobody's being left behind, this is one of the huge problems. Distance learning doesn't work without internet, so that's extremely important.
Great. Thank you. And now I'm going to move just solely to our assembly candidates, and switching the questions around just a little bit in the order. Sorry. What's your thoughts about the CBJ budget and how we, the citizens, will be directly impacted? And I'm going to start with you this time, Alicia.
Well, I can say that we can anticipate that it's going to be a tough budget year, and there's going to be tough decisions that need to be made. When we created the budget last year, we were already under strain just from actions that had occurred at the state level with cuts there. So with the lack of a cruise ship season and all the other economic hits that we've taken unexpectedly, we know it's going to be tight. In anticipation of last year, we already completed a budget prioritization exercise, and the way I approached it was to kind of build a town from the ground up. So, you know, you start with your very basic core services, your schools, your public safety, your roads, your water, things like that. And then I think after that, it's going to be important for the assembly to prioritize the things that do the most good, the services that do the most good for the most people. and then take an eye towards those services that are serving underserved communities, so that what the city is providing is really necessary, and it's not, as opposed to maybe for someone else a service is a cherry on top that the city provides that service, but to a different group of people, they really need that service. So that's how I'll be approaching an eye on the budget this year. It's a especially important time for how it affects the citizens. It's especially important for people to communicate with your assembly, tell them the things that are most important to you. And we have a community that already does that more than you might think, but it's going to be especially important in the coming times. And this assembly is just going to have to also be mindful of, we already have a very expensive cost of living here, and people are already hurting. So we don't want to we'll try to minimize passing that on.
Thank you. Kenny?
Thank you, Jackie. Jump in right to the hard question. I like it. So this is probably one of the reasons why I'm running. You know, everybody's going to be impacted by the budget, and it's very important that we navigate through this carefully. And I can't talk. But, you know, we did do this budget prioritizing last year, but I think we're going to need to come back and revisit that like we do every year. You know, we're going to have, I just believe with the state cutting back on our funding too, you know, school bond debt, we're going to have to pay that off, you know, which is like $20 million over the next 5 years. So figure about $5 million a year. So we have to take care of these core services, schools, police, fire, keep up with our maintenance on our roads and our plowing of our roads and stuff. You know, sometimes you kind of look at it and you want to look at the budget a little bit backwards, you know, kind of look at expenditures and what we have to do, and then versus about what we can to do good for the whole community, like Alicia said, and I agree with that too. But we really need to make sure that we're careful and not to raise taxes, use some of our reserve funds. We have a rainy day fund. We've got $34 million approximately in our general fund, and I know that there's like, I think it's 14 million of it is a rainy day fund. And believe me, everybody, it ain't raining any harder ever than it has right now in Juneau, and we need to make sure that we take care of our people with that. And again, like I said, this can't fall on the taxpayers' back. You know, we've lost we lost one of our key industries, tourism, this year. Zero tourism, so we're not going to have any of those dollars here. So we have to be very mindful and take care of our community and really be thoughtful as we navigate through this budget process. So I know there's going to be tough choices, and I'm ready to make these tough choices for Juneau.
Well, that just leads me to the next question, which of course is a tough choice that the citizens are going to make when they go to the ballot box on Proposition 2, you know, which it requests a tax increase. But so what's your response to those that question the timing of this Proposition 2 and in our changing economy, with the issues around our changing economy right now? And I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Kenny.
And I'm going to unmute. So I am not a big fan of bundling. I think all projects need to stand alone. And as an assembly person, I would work, you know, you can't guarantee and say 100%, but I would really work towards making all projects stand alone. But with that being said, school roofs are very important, and it's going to put people to work. But there is a huge amount of gray area in this $15 million package that the assembly, it owes it to the taxpayers to know what their money is going to be spent on. You know, I know that they say that they took the recommendations for the Economic Stabilization Task Force. Well, that recommendation was to put Pioneer Road in there and school roofs and then parks. Well, then the assembly took out the Pioneer Road, so it just kind of left a huge hole of a gray area. And I'd be glad to get people to work. I've said this over and over and over again. I probably am going to support this because I want people to get back to work. But the best part of this bonding package is that the people get to vote on it. So it's going to be the people's decision, and I'm really happy that it's going to the people for them to be able to vote. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Alicia?
I think the way the thrust of this question is a good one, because it's really asking, what about the timing? Is this the right time to do something like bonds? And I very much appreciate that. That is a reasonable concern. I can say that the city is well positioned at this time to take on debt, as far as taking on debt goes, and the rates are good. So the timing in that way, although it may not seem it, is good. But I would counter that and really say how I view these bonds, and the reason that I'm a strong supporter of them, is that this is the right time to make an investment in our community. And that's what I really see these as. Because yes, we're taking on debt, but we're putting this money into the economy. And it's an investment in Juneau's future. So things like school roofs, we've been kind of like a lot of communities around the state, treading water, waiting to see what would happen, up on the hill there. And now we realize that for decisions like this, we're just going to have to decide as a community and take that on ourselves. The other projects, I think, are great because, we have some energy money set aside for the parks that are refurbished. That's going to save Juneau money in the long run. And the streets will be broken down into many small jobs, so many people are working. And the best part about that is, at a time that when other people are kind of retracting and development is sort of slowing naturally, instead of having this freeze and contraction when we're already economically strained, the assembly can kind of be that lubricant to keep people working, keep that money in the community. And so I think the timing is good.
Great, thank you. My next question has to something that's been important to us at Tlingit and Haida is seeing this CBJ Systemic Racism Review Committee. And can you give us your thoughts about that, starting with you, Alicia, and then going to you, to Kenny?
Absolutely. Well, I was really proud to vote for this, and I was really excited when we passed it. I think after hearing from the community, and this is a long-standing thing, of course, but with just moments nationally, translating into actions here and hearing an outcry from the community, that I think a lot of people in the assembly wanted to do something tangible. And then, and you're saying what? And I was so grateful to Mr. Edwardson for bringing this forward, and I really think it was a good thing to do. I think this is going to be a huge change to how we do things currently. And I think that's a good thing. We're going to get good information from that back. And I think anytime you change the status quo, that can feel like this big, scary action. But it's important to remember that your alternative is the status quo. And when the status quo is that members of our community do not feel like a full member of the community, that there is systemic racism, and we know Juneau is not immune, then we can't live with the status quo, and we're going to have to take those actions. And the best part about the committee, I think, will be that we're listening to people who have lived experience. And so that's going to provide the best insight into how the city can make impactful change and actively work to improve this. So it's a great first step.
Thank you. Kenny?
This could be like a whole Tlingit and Haida lunchtime chat. This should be a conversation going back and forth. So, so I just wrote something real quick here. So we're very fortunate to live in a community that will even talk about this subject. And I'm a pretty forward-thinking guy, but in a case like this, I just think we have to go back in history. And our city needs to hire an independent auditor to go through our ordinances in the last few years to see if there's any systemic racism or systematic racism in there. And we have to do it independently. That has no ties to Juneau. So we're keeping sidewalls on Juneau, talking about Juneau, but this auditor comes in here. And I just want to compare it to, I'm on the hospital board, and every 2 or 3 years, we have to bring somebody in to come and look at our compliance and quality. Somebody that doesn't work for Juneau, that's not picked by the assembly, somebody that has no ties to Juneau, and come in there and set our vision forward to making sure that we're not doing anything wrong. So that's how I think that this should be done. And then once we get this stuff, we can give it to the committee, and they will have a charge and a direction going forward. And I'm really happy that we're having these really tough conversations. And I'm also a really big fan of our Human Rights Commission. I've been able to sit through many of their recent sessions, and Ms. Farugi's work, I think, is just awesome, and she's very gentle, and she navigates through it great. So I'm really glad we're having these conversations. Thank you.
Great. And since I am moderating, I get to throw in the question that I want to have. So the next question for my other role as housing authority is, Juneau is dealing with and evaluating these options for our homelessness and looking at emergency shelter locations. We're also talking about youth shelters and having to deal with the growing homelessness of our youth. How do you feel about these options? And are there any solutions that you think that we should consider or address in this conversation around our homeless current situation? I'm going to start with you, Kenny.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. So homelessness is a real passion of mine, and there's so many different levels of homelessness, and there's levels where you get from the very bottom rung, I guess, to go into housing first, and now, of course, our students. And I know last year we had like 117 students that were considered homelessness in Juneau that were couch surfing or whatever, and we don't want those kids on the streets. So, there's a big, huge mental health problem, and we really need to make sure that we get in touch with the mental health problem. But just to answer directly with your question, I know right now there's a big talk on the Hurlock property, that was actually Johnson Youth Center, but maybe not Johnson Youth Center, the Miller House. And, that would be a start that could help, if we can get the private sector involved and the nonprofits involved and even, the tribal communities involved to help set that up, that would be great. The school board has to be part of this solution too. We need to talk to you guys, Brian and Martin, on what we can do and really identify the students that are in school that are in need and how we can help them and identify it before it happens. Education is so important to see. Right now our kids aren't in school. We don't know what's happening with the kids. At least there's coaches and teachers and stuff that see our school, our students. You'll hear a commercial on the radio. If you see something, say something. And that's child advocacy. So it's a whole holistic problem, and we want to stop juvenile homelessness right away so it doesn't fall into that vicious cycle and turn out to the end route where they're on the streets and really homelessness for a chronic amount of time.
Thank you. Alicia?
Thanks. This is something I would really love to see the city take more ownership of as an issue, and I'm hoping we get to do that in the coming term. The decision to the locations that were being looked at for a warming shelter with the use of the CARES funds, so that was in a narrow vote, so we stopped looking at that. I was supportive of purchase of a building, but that didn't happen for the time being. That being said, what we do know is that when we do invest city resources, we need to invest in things like permanent supportive housing and those options that are going to make the biggest impact in actually taking somebody out of that and making them in a position where they're housed. You're not just doing a stopgap measure. So I think we do need to be supporting with city resources those projects that come along where you have those options that are going to make the biggest difference for the community. The emergency shelter and other solutions for homeless youth, that's a real gap in Juneau's continuum of care. And that's been identified at the state level, and it's something we've known ever since Cornerstone closed. So the Herlock property, I believe we'll be actually looking at on this coming, or the coming assembly meeting, to see if that's moving forward. So I think we do need to have these solutions in place, that we have something to address. It's a spectrum of whether you're just emergency sheltering someone for a night to, are you getting them in permanent supportive housing? I think rapid rehousing would be a great investment by the city, where you're stopping people from ending up needing to losing their chance at keeping something. It's a great use of resources, and I think the city would be wise to invest in it. And we have a position at the city, and we have great social services in town. So I'd really like to see the coordinator take a more active role, to where we're working better together. But that's a great question.
Great, thank you. I know we have listeners, many listeners on the watching us, because this is a virtual meeting, and we do have some questions that have been submitted. So I'd like to take advantage of getting those questions asked right now, and if we have time, we'll go back to some of the other questions we had pre-prepared. Sam?
I should know better than that. All right. Questions. Thank you, everyone. Our first question is from Paula Peterson. Do you think it's important to acknowledge the history of this land, and that it should be taught in schools, K through 12, meaning more involvement from tribal citizens to enter into the classrooms and bring their rich history to the students and better understand the people of the lands that they're living?
And I'm going to direct those to the two school board folks, if we can. So I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Martin, and then to Brian.
All right, thank you. Yes, I would definitely support that, and I think it's extremely important to teach the real history of the lands of the original people who lived here. And I think that one of the things that I would like to see, and I don't even know if that as a board or as a single school we could do this, but I would like to see one more credit added to our social studies within the school district, because there's required 3 credits for our social studies, and a lot of it has to do with American history, and half a credit on Alaskan history, and half a credit on some other history, but I don't think there's enough. I think whenever students get out of the Juneau School District, they still don't know the actual history of the place that they've lived in their whole lives. And that's a shame. We in this day and age, it shouldn't be like that anymore. We need to teach our students and the people that live here the actual history of the first peoples of Alaska, Juneau, Akwán people. Yes, I would support that.
Thank you. And I'd like to just add a little bit. You know, I grew up here, and I experienced our schools here. And when I grew up, it was the native population was the same, but it wasn't as prevalent in our community and in our schools as I see now. And that's a hugely positive change, and maybe more of a commentary on what it was like then, but I see huge improvement. And we need to do more. At the school board, at our very last school board meeting, I serve on the Alaska Association of School Boards, and we're bringing a resolution to them to create a textbook on Alaska history written by, co-authored by Alaskan Native historians. Turns out we teach Alaskan history in Alaska, and there's no textbook written by Alaskan scholars, Alaskan Native scholars. It seems kind of absurd when you think about that, where we're getting our history from. And it may not be wrong, but it may be. It's certainly likely to be biased. So we definitely need to pay more attention to that. And it's questions like these that just make us think. We think we're doing fine, And then we get an opportunity to reflect on it, and we're like, whoa, we're missing out. Same thing, we identified that somebody regarding Black, and I started to go off on the topic a little bit, but Black Lives Matter. Somebody asked the simple question, how many books do you have authored by Black authors about Black lives? And we thought, wow, we counted not too many. Same thing, how many books do we have that we encourage our kids to read authored by Alaska Natives about being an Alaska Native? Not enough. So these are great questions. Thank you for that question. It just prompts us to work harder on these areas.
Right, and just so you know, we have a couple other thoughts about, making sure that languages, our native languages is really important, making sure that languages might be even a required class, something along those lines. Sam, we have another question. Would you like to go ahead and read it?
Yes, I would. Thank you. This question's from President Peterson. When we talk about supporting our teachers, and not just our teachers, our community, I would like to know more about supporting the mental health and wellness. What support is being offered to address this?
Particularly at this time. And just to know, before you start answering that question, and all of you guys will be able to answer this question, but I want to let you know, President Peterson did an amazing thing for all the staff, and I know my staff at the Housing Authority were able to participate. We had a hope and resiliency training session, series of training sessions, just to be able to help people cope during this time period of COVID. So ball's in your court. Let's go ahead and we'll start, and we'll mix it up a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and let you, Alicia, start, and then we'll just go up. Alicia, Kenny, Brian, then Martin.
Thanks. I'm happy to get to take a crack at this one. That is so important right now. I think that we can get so focused on what the direct solutions are for whatever the emergency of the moment is, and we're not really taking space to recognize people are under a tremendous amount of stress, that having something about your resiliency and also taking a space for your mental health is so important right now. And sadly, that's just not something we do great on as our national culture anyway. And I'm sure people have even less headspace and for making sure they're carving out a healthy life balance. I mean, in terms of what we can provide for that, I think something like a training is super useful. Allowing flexibility, communicating with your staff and letting them know where they have an open relationship where they feel like they can ask for what they need, and regular communication to acknowledge the unprecedented time that we are living in, and setting what is a more realistic expectation we should all have of ourselves at this time is really important.
Great. Kenny?
Hi, this is such an important question, and thank you for asking that. So right now at the hospital, we have a crisis stabilization being ready to be built to help the community. But in this time right now, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but 5% of the students in the Juneau School District has sought help for crisis mental illness since the pandemic started, from their anxiety to depression, not being able to with sports. It's daunting, and we're fortunate we keep recruiting and we keep hiring mental health specialists to help. We have a great person at the hospital, Bradley Gregg, who's really working on this. And these are just the numbers that we're finding from the community. Now, I know Search has their own numbers too, so it's going to be more than 5%. It's huge. And that's why I was saying earlier, and now I'm talking about children right now, I'll go to the second about teachers and stuff, is that we see something, we make sure that, these wet, cold, dark months are going to happen. And if we're not aware of what the mental health of our community, unfortunately, people commit suicide. And, we need to make sure that we have suicide prevention watch out for everybody. You know, teachers are stressed. They're afraid to come to school. You know, I know, Brian, we've talked about this before. You know, they're afraid that they're going to get sick. They're afraid that they're not going to be able to protect their students or their families. So, you know, we need to make sure that we have intervention around our whole community and that everybody is working together to make sure that we're watching out for one another. But mental health right now is such an important subject that we just keep needing to talk about it all the time. And mental health is all encompassing, including alcohol, opiate addiction, anything to do with anything. We need to really watch out for people's mental health, especially during these times. And now the weather's changing and it's going to get darker. We need to just keep watching and taking care of our people. Thank you, Jackie, for asking that question.
Thank you, Brian.
And I'll be brief. I know that the district has accommodated the work needs of dozens, I forget the number, close to 100 special needs for staff across the 600 staff people. But what I don't know, again, while I appreciate these questions, is what other mental health supports are we offering, especially for COVID-19? So thank you for that question, and I want to learn more, because we're accommodating, but maybe we're not being as proactive as we should be.
Thank you. And Martin.
You know, I just got done talking with one of my friends the other day who is a teacher, and she's talking about trying to go back to working from home, because everything that she does, she comes straight to the school every morning and she gets on Zoom, and she's on Zoom all day long already anyway. And so she said that she tried to apply for, to try to apply to go back from distance learning, and there's a backlog of teachers and things that the administration is trying to catch up on. And so maybe things like that we can help our teachers with, make sure that our administration has enough staff to keep up with the needs of our teachers. We know that cyberbullying is huge right now. It's something that we need to follow. We need to become innovative on making sure that our students are not experiencing cyberbullying. And so I know the school district is working on that with their devices, but with distance learning now, all of our students are not on school district devices anymore, so it's harder to follow now. But this is such a big near and dear problem to my heart, that mental health is really big, and it's something I would like to stay close to as a high priority if I'm elected. And yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody who participated today, and particularly our panelists. I know it's tough running for a campaign, you get these questions, and I know we didn't get to ask you all the questions we would have liked to, and certainly there are many, many more questions out there. But what I want to say to those of you who are watching this Native Issues Forum and really studying about your candidates, get to know them. You got to see a side of your candidates today. Don't be afraid to ask them the questions. You can tell they're ready to give you answers. They want to tell you. They want to tell you how they feel about things. So before we end up getting ready to close here, I want to make sure that if you could move to the Native Vote, I want to remind everybody about some important dates on the election dates. Don't forget, September 22nd is a National Voter Registration Day. I know a lot of voter registration happens automatically, but it's a good time for you to remind yourself to check in to make sure that you have your right address, especially for those of you who will be voting in the CBJ elections, on October 6th. We want to make sure that you've got your ballot and it's coming to the right place. Also know that you can drop off your ballots. You don't necessarily have to mail them in, but you can actually drop them off. Another thing that's important is if you're going to vote remotely for the main elections, make sure that you get a hold of the Division of Elections, and you can request an absentee ballot so you can vote from home where you feel safe. You can either get them on the online, or you can actually call them on their local number, which is 907-270-2700, and request your absentee ballot. which is another good way to do it. Don't let COVID be your excuse for not participating in these elections, both at the CBJ and at the national elections, because they're very important to us. And I can't leave this session without talking about census. I mean, we're getting close to the end of the bewitching days. You know, the deadline has been changed to September 30th. Today, Don Young joined in putting forward another bill, a bill sponsored a bill similar to the Murkowski Sullivan bill that they had signed on earlier, to tell the administration, to mandate to the administration to extend the deadline for census. I went online this morning, checked census website to see where Alaska was, to see where our communities are. And I am nervous because Alaska, when you look at the data for self-reporting, Alaska is the lowest state in the nation for self-reporting. Now, I know that, you know, that the census workers are out there working frantically to get us up, but I'm not sure that I can trust that. I really hope that everybody self-report. Go to my2020census.gov. It only takes a few minutes, and fill out your census form. Don't forget, if you're a Native household, make sure that the number one person on your line is the Native person. And now, don't forget, this is the most important, one of the important parts, people love this, is the census, the drawing. So we have a random drawing. For those, if you've liked in the Facebook Live event, you get a chance to win a prize. And so the drama is rolling, and the winner is, the Hydro Flask is Eva Harvey. The t-shirt, the David Boxley t-shirt, oh, I love those. Myrna Gardner, oh, she's so lucky. I hope she wears it walking. So thank you for joining us. And once again, I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank and don't forget to exercise your right to vote. Thank Martin Steppen and Brian Holst, who are running for the unopposed for the Board of Education and School Board, excuse me, and Kenny Solomon Gross and Alicia Hughes Scandis, who are running for District 1 CBJ Assembly. So good luck to all of you. And we thank you all again for being part of our event today. Look forward to seeing you next week for Tlingit Haida's Lunchtime Chats. Same time, same place. Thanks.
Thank you so much.